Environmental analysis. Tisanji offers a feature for analyzing several environmental parameters that can be used to identify potentially problematic situations. In this example, we start with a plan that has already been drawn up and go through the different steps involved in the analysis. The first step will be to map the various environmental parameters. To do this, I will start by displaying the Google Earth map and hiding all my surface layers so that we can work solely from the photo. Mapping the various environmental situations on the garden plan. First, I will start by defining a base layer. For me, a rectangle works best here, but you could draw a polygon by hand. I'm going to include my entire property and even extend a little into my neighbor's property. That's okay. I'm going to go into the details of my surface, rename it environmental base, and give the parameters that broadly define my property. We'll see later that I'll make exceptions on top of this. This isn't a real example, it's a tutorial to show the functionality. Let's say it's a plot of land that is generally semi-shaded, clayey, with a lot of water and poor drainage. Obviously, you should choose the parameters that apply to your plot of land. I've defined my base and I'm going to come here to my layers and rename my layer to call it environment and drag this layer all the way to the bottom of all my other layers. This is important because in environmental analysis, the sequence of layers is important. If there is a conflict between criteria applied to overlapping surfaces, the one on top takes precedence over the one below. Now that I've created my base, I'm going to identify areas that are exceptions to the base. I can come here and draw, for example, an area that is more shaded. Here, we'll assume that this area gets less than 3 hours of sunlight, so it's shaded. I press the environment button to say that this is a shaded area. Similarly, here I have a tree in front, so we could assume that this tree is also a shaded area, and so we'll do the same thing. We draw the surface and click on the environment and select shade. Note that I'm not selecting the other elements. The other elements still correspond to my base. Here's a tip. When you draw your surfaces related to the environment, remember to reduce the opacity of the layer to 50 so that you can see the area they correspond to underneath. Here I have an area that is quite sunny at the back. We're going to create another surface here and define it as sunny. Let's say I have a rather sandy area here. Maybe there has been some filling, so I'm going to draw a section here that is rather sandy, acidic, and well drained. Finally, I can also use surfaces already defined on my plan. For example, my garden bed surfaces. Where I have modified the nature of the soil, for example, if I regularly add a lot of compost, I have raised it to improve drainage and adjusted the pH to neutral. I will display the layers of my flower beds to make selection easier, and then I click on Environment and define the predominant soil type: humus, neutral, and well drained. Displaying environment maps. I will display the different layers that define my garden plan and hide the environment layer. To display the map that includes the analysis of the overlapping areas that define the environment, I open the Environment tab, then the Environment section, and finally I select the criteria from which I want to display the map. For example, sunlight, and finally the eye of the zones. tisanji places the surfaces on top of each other so that we can see that my sunny area is yellow, the shaded areas are blue, and the semi-shaded areas are green. It has respected the order of the surfaces. If, for example, I come here to my environment layer and, just to show you, If I drag my sunny area below the environmental base, we can see the result on the sunlight map. The sunny area disappears because it is below the partial shade defined in the base. Tisanji analyzes whether plants are positioned in areas that are optimal for their cultivation. So when we choose a factor such as sunlight, tisanji looks at the position of each plant and compares its environment to the information specified in the plant card. It provides us with a list of plants to check because they are placed in an environment that is not optimal for them. I can click on the eye to display, in red on the map or the exclamation mark on the list, the plants located in an inappropriate environment, and in orange on the map or the warning on the list, those in an environment that they tolerate, as opposed to recommended. You can check the analysis for each criteria: soil type, acidity, water quantity, drainage. Look at the map and the list of points to check regarding the location of plants. View and hide different aspects of environmental analysis. To stop seeing the environmental maps, deselect the criterion. You can close the eye located at the zone to see the map, and the eye at the warning to see the critical location of the plants. Finally, you can remove some plants on the warning list by removing the orange bow on the finger of the plant. Use environmental information to obtain suggestions for plants suited to the environment. You can also use environmental parameters to create a palette of plants suited to the environment of a flower bed. To do this, select the flower bed for which you want to receive suitable suggestions. Then, in the context menu, select Search by Environmental Condition. The plant tabs will open, and you will see that several filters have already been pre-selected. These filters select all the criteria, but also all the lifespans, so the hardiness of the soil is taken into account, and the maximum width, because the size of the flower bed is also taken into account. All that remains is to add our own criteria, such as function, flowering period, or flower color.